Hi, we're going to just check in about the Fluencies chapter and give you a couple updates. So, first of all, we're aware that fall breaks are coming up and that different schools have different fall breaks. Our fall break actually falls in the first week of October. Some are in the middle of October and some are at the end of October. Preferably, it would be helpful for us for grading sanity if you could get the assignments in on the due date, of course, or if you have them ready before. But let us know if you need an extension, and we'll talk to you about that on a one-on-one basis. Also, for coming up is the last action assignment, and that's going to be during the comprehension chapter. I believe it's week 10, and you'll be leading a small group dealing with some kind of comprehension strategy. And you'll be videotaping yourself, so have that in mind now so you can prepare for that and plan it with your mentor teacher. This can be done even in a math class or history class. Maybe math, you want to talk about the grammar of word problems to be able to help students that are maybe having an issue with that. I did that a lot with my middle school students. That would be a great thing to do in a small group. Or for history, you can sit down and have a small group of students on how to read a nonfiction text, or where to find the main idea, details, etc. So just be thinking about it, and you can use any of the main idea scaffoldings and suggestions in the Graves chapter, or one that you already use with your class. But we just want to give you guys an experience of teaching a lesson based on reading comprehension. So it's going to be more informal than your final lesson plan that's a little more formal. So let us know if you have any questions on that. So notes on fluency, we just wanted to pound in some of the key ideas in this chapter that we feel are important. For fluency, as Graves says, good fluency usually equals good comprehension, or it does equal good comprehension. And that just doesn't mean that a kid has a good fluency rate. A lot of people, especially if you're giving the Dibbles assessment, which is just looking at a word count per minute or fluency rate, will see that as the whole package in terms of a student's fluency. And a student's fluency is a lot more than that. It's their prosody, their expression. How are they using expression in the passage? Are they pausing at the appropriate places? Are they phrasing prepositional phrases or various phrases appropriately, or are they stopping at awkward places? That's really essential. Do they sound like a good reader when they're reading? So if they sound like a good reader when they're reading, they probably are a good reader. And they probably are understanding what they're reading, because it's hard to fake it. If they don't understand it, they're going to have a hard time pausing at the appropriate places, having a good rate, having the whole package. So again, if a student has good fluency at a given level, they probably have really good comprehension at that level as well. So I just want to take a second to think about ELLs, because oftentimes they may have a really good rate, and they're able to decode really quickly, but you may be able to see that their comprehension is off, not just by asking them comprehension questions, but because their expression is probably poor. Their phrasing is probably off. Those are things I commonly see with ELL students. So, and then also kids that are having a hard time with reading. I've had a lot of other students that aren't ELLs, but they have really good rate just because they've become proficient decoders. But you can tell that they're having a hard time with reading, again, because of the phrasing issues. They're just blowing through punctuation, not stopping at all. It feels like a race to them. And so those are things you can see when you're doing a running record or reading with your student, and be able to focus instruction on for them. And those are really good areas to focus instruction, because it will really help give them practical tools to help them to slow down and to think about expression, etc., and to be a better reader. So I liked a lot of the Graves ideas in the chapter, and I use them frequently because I think fluency is super important. I do use a lot of phrased reading with my students, practicing how to phrase a text. It's great to use poetry to do that because they're short and sweet, and they have a lot of the phrases already, for the students, line by line, and that really helps them to kind of get the idea of it before they use an actual text to do phrase reading. In one of the forums, there's actually a section for some resources for the different strands of literacy, and in that there's some examples of how to do a phrased reading. And I would use that from like second grade up. And there's actually some really great resources for students in elementary that are actually strips of paper with phrases on, and it helps students to practice reading in phrases. And so that would be a great center activity for them to just practice those phrases and time themselves, etc., etc. So make sure to take a look at that. Also, some things I think that are good for phrase reading or for building fluency is having kids to give presentations, reading from cue cards and practicing phrasing, etc., intonation, expression with that. Also, partner reading is really helpful because the two partners can support each other, and any opportunity that have kids reading out loud is really beneficial to building their fluency. Repeat readings, reading the same passage over and over is another way to help build fluency. Also, having kids listen to books on tape is an excellent way to build reading fluency and also to build vocabulary. But it's great because they're hearing a proficient reader read and hearing how a fluent reader should sound, and eventually that works its way into their own reading. And that's why read alouds are good also, because they hear a teacher read and they hear how good reading should sound, and then over time their reading starts to mimic that, and they learn how to be a better fluent reader that way. So a couple other things I just want to talk about, different programs you can use to improve students' fluency in class. Read Naturally, I've heard great things about. I've never used it, but Graves talks about it in this chapter. Great Leaps, we use at our site. It's $150, I think, for the entire package, and then you could just make photocopies, and that's a great program also for fluency. And it's 10 minutes a day, one-on-one with students. And then I think I have a free online program that you can get from Intervention Central. And I think it's called HELPS, is the HELPS is the acronym for that. Finally, a couple other things I wanted to talk about. Fry's readability scale, and this is something that I would say is very beneficial to do with middle school and high school students, or 4th and 5th grade students. On page 247, Graves has the Fry readability formula and the graph, and I actually did this when I was in grad school on my students' science text, because I was interested to see what the reading level was on their science text, and they were 7th grade students, and I used this graph to figure out what the reading level of the text was, and it was an 11th grade reading level. So I think you guys it might be a little eye-opening to see what your students are expected to read, and I think that's why I think you should try it with your text if you can, because it's really helpful to see where your text is, and then it will help you to know how to support them better if you find out how high it is. And it's going to be high, probably. And it's fast. It's like a 5-minute activity that you can do to see the level of your book. And then I was going to talk about Lexiles quickly. There's a lot of different ways to see a student's reading level. Lexiles is one of them, and the SRI that many of our schools use for Read 180 uses Lexiles and places a student at a given Lexile. And it's just one slice of it's just one part of the picture of a student's reading, and I wouldn't necessarily use that to guide my instruction. I might use it to make some decisions instructionally, but I wouldn't use their Lexile number to guide guided reading groups or Read 180 class or a student's instructional level, etc., etc. what the Lexile do is just look at sentence complexity. They don't look, so they're looking at the sentence complexity. And usually as texts get harder, the sentences become more complex. But it's supposed to gauge comprehension. I think it does pretty well. But again, I wouldn't use it strictly to place students. So I just wanted to say that because I know a lot of our schools do that. So anyways, let us know if you have any questions. Mark is going to hop over here and share some thoughts as well.
I had a couple of ideas thinking about this week on fluency, especially from the perspective of a secondary teacher. I know that whatever you teach, reading is really important, but I find that what we tend to focus on as high school instructors and middle school instructors to a large extent too, is on the students' comprehension level, because we want our students to use reading particularly usually to get at the content standards that we're trying to teach. So rightly, we're focused on comprehension. However, often we find ourselves either having a student reading out loud in class, or they're reading with us one-on-one, and we realize that